Welcome back to another week of Political Paradigms. It's the original team, the OGs, Toby and Sonny. What am I about? Toby and Theo with you this week. That's not the OGs. Hi, Theo.
Hello.
Hello.
I guess Sonny's replaced me now then, huh? As the OG.
Yeah, you're definitely the OG. I don't know what's going on there.
Did you see what I said in the group chat when he opted out less than an hour ago?
Oh, yeah, he just dipped and Theo went, stealing my signature move. I'm seeing Sonny tomorrow. We're going into Parliament. So if there's anyone you want me to say hello to for you, Theo, let me know while I'm down in the palaces of Westminster.
Say hi to your MP for me.
I will.
Since you forged such a great relationship with him last time.
The classic. Theo was like, "Go talk to your MP," and I chickened out, didn't I, Theo? Good
Yeah, and make sure you get some gluten-free cheese carrot cake or something.
Oh, it was beautiful. Gluten-free carrot cake in Parliament. Love it. All right.
Sky went back to get like 3 slices.
I got three, and they were big slices as well, weren't they? Those weren't little. They weren't skimping. Anyway, shout out to the Italian guy that was serving that to me. Friendliest man I've ever met. He was just like, "Yeah, have some gluten-free carrot cake." I was like, "Don't mind if I do." Anyway, on to the podcast. We'll start, as we always do, with British politics, since that is the bulk of our focus. And the deluge, or as aides in number 10 have taken to calling it, the grid of shit that's heading towards Rishi Sunak in the coming months. There appears to be a concerted effort on the part of the right of the party and a minority of the party, at this stage not even enough to trigger a leadership contest, that they're working to destabilise Rishi Sunak. There are plots to install Penny Mordaunt. There are plots to install Kemi Badenoch. There are plots to install Suella Braverman. There are plots to do this after the by-elections in a few weeks, after the local elections in May. Basically, these people are locked in a room, slowly going more and more insane, thinking of ways to get rid of Rishi Sunak in time for a general election. Theo, is any of this worth our time?
No.
Is it complete fabricated nonsense, would you say, in your professional opinion?
I mean, I'm sure there's such plans do exist. Honestly, though, from a tactical standpoint, it makes way more sense to wait until after the election to then feed off the fervor and the anti-Sunak, anti-moderate Tory sentiment that will inevitably arise. And the only reason I can think of for them not waiting it out to a much more opportunistic time after the election is to try and beat Farage and Reform to it, to represent essentially the far right at the election.
Yeah. I mean, apparently Kemi Badenoch has been panicking and saying, I mean, this is obviously speculation. We have no idea if any of this is true. But in one of the papers, it was basically said that Kemi Badenoch is saying, "Please don't talk about me as leader. I don't want to be leader. Rishi needs to own this defeat," was the direct quote. So that seems to be the feeling, right?
As if she's going to be involuntarily thrust into number 10. I mean,
can you imagine?
Curb your ego, Miss Badenoch.
Well, favourite for leader of the opposition. She won't be if she becomes Prime Minister before the election. But yeah, basically.
No. I think if she wants any kind of tenure. But you know what this does highlight to me is, I think the COVID pandemic was possibly the time when our idea of level-headed, calculated ministers kind of was quashed. I mean, the COVID inquiry, if any of you watched any of it, any testimonials, especially from Dominic Cummings, which was most cutting, you just realize they're essentially, running around like headless chickens in there. You can have as many spads as you want, as many millionaire donors as you want, and these people are still acting on emotions, U-turning, backtracking constantly, and freaking out a lot.
I'm looking at there's been a lot of copium this week of people saying, a new Conservative leader can win. Polling indicates, there was a polling question over the weekend, if we were to replace Rishi Sunak with Kemi Badenoch, would you be more or less likely to vote Conservative? On balance, the Conservative vote share drops. But also, The Telegraph came to our rescue. Basically did a big MRP poll, and it found that in the overwhelming majority of constituencies, people preferred Keir Starmer as Prime Minister to Rishi Sunak. But when asked, would they prefer Keir Starmer or a Conservative leader who cut taxes, stopped the boats, did this, did that, did the other, they might prefer the Tory leader. So someone compared this question to basically going, would you rather be married to me, your husband, or George Clooney with my personality and like £1 million in the bank account? It's sort of an unrealistic question. But basically it looks like the sort of Telegraph, I call it the Telegraph wing of conservatism, is now intent on either replacing Sunak or really pinning this defeat on Sunak and saying anyone else, anyone but Sunak, ABS, would have won the election.
For sure.
Do you think that's the idea?
Yes. Trying to single Sunak out as like a kind of a parasite on the old institution of conservatism, even though, he's pretty much an archetypal Tory politician, you could say, of this era at least. And honestly, it's quite surprising to me, seeing a large response of people saying I would vote Conservative if they cut taxes and stop the boats, because the government, when this government did have a mandate, almost 5 years ago now, they said, we'll cut taxes. They raised taxes higher to the level than Jeremy Corbyn committed to.
This is
They
true.
didn't stop the boats. The boats have gotten worse. I mean, are you just gonna, insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting different results. So this is pretty much literally insane.
I mean, it is, and the polls are getting worse. It feels like a doom loop, right? It feels like a complete doom loop. And I don't know what happened, and maybe this is unfair, and I'm sure there are lots of sensible conservative strategists, but doesn't it kind of feel like the new year happened, inflation's come down, and they were like, right, where's our polling bump? And the polling bump didn't happen, and now they're sort of collectively losing their minds a little bit? Like,
almost.
Why isn't it getting better?
I mean, God, you have to have been in quite a bubble to actually think that essentially manufactured inflation numbers are going to represent a real change in the lives of people. When if you look anywhere outside of the Office for National Statistics, you can quite literally see that nothing else really changed in price except energy, which pretty much distorted the figures, and housing, people's biggest payments, barely shifted. In fact, I think it even went up, and then there was this unexpected inflation bump last month. I mean, yeah, the idea that they were going to gain popularity from that, I mean, quite delusional, it seems.
It's the sort of, I think that the problem is what it always was, right? The Conservative coalition is fractured. Reform UK are they're on the cusp of overtaking the Lib Dems in the polls, eating away at Conservative vote share. Labour are heading back to the mid-40s. The Conservatives, in some polls, are at levels they were under Liz Truss. It's not good. Some polling in the 150 seats that Labour need to win from the Conservatives. Labour are on 52% in those seats, and the Conservatives are on 18%. So the swing is actually worse for the Conservatives in the seats Labour needs to win. So if you're
for Labour.
Yeah, if you're prior. Oh, and there's another. It's kind of related, kind of unrelated. It's related to the doom loop. A poll from Scotland over this weekend. Labour now have a clear lead over the SNP. So that's
probably better news for them than anything to do with the Tories. I mean, it's always been known Labour essentially they do need to win Scotland. They got quite a big base. I think people thought it was kind of just inevitably part of political life now that the SNP will dominate Scotland and eventually break away. But I've been quite surprised in the last 2 or 3 years to see the relative decline of the pro-independence movement. I don't know if you've also noticed this, but I kind of assumed it was going to continue growing in further. But in fact, Labour have really been able to turn that around, which is honestly, again, it might be to do with just the Tories losing so much popularity. But then again, people losing faith in the Tories in Scotland could have easily turned to the SNP. So there's got to be at least some credit given to Labour on that part. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what's going on is in all bits of the country right now, as of right now, it looks like voters are basically just prioritising we're voting not the Tories. And
it is a mass tactical voting effort. It feels like
no one's voting for Labour, and Labour don't really need people to vote for Labour. They need people to vote against the Conservatives, and it looks like Scotland, Wales, England, blue wall, red wall, north, south, coastal, rural, urban. I mean, Labour has a lead among rural voters. Think about that.
That is quite literally the Tory base. I would also say, in terms of reform, I know we said on the pod before, yes, reform have massive polling numbers now compared to when they were UKIP and then the Brexit Party. But of course, that might not manifest necessarily into any seats at all. But it's worth noting, when UKIP were polling very highly before the 2015 general election, the Conservatives were kind of able to mitigate that by promising a Brexit election, essentially appealing to that base. They've got nothing now for the reform base. In fact, they're doing the opposite. They are failing to stop the boats. I don't think anyone really has faith in the Rwanda plan. They've got nothing to kind of stem the flow of blood from them to the Reform Party.
That is a really good point, actually, because there is no trump card this time. What are they going to do?
Exactly.
We're going to give you a referendum on the European Convention of Human Rights or something. Like, what's the...
I mean, now you say it.
Don't tempt them. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, if Sunak's smart enough, he may think to put that to a referendum, but, I would more expect him just to legislate it out of existence.
Yeah.
Or legislate us out of it.
I thought you were going to say legislate us out of existence, which would be...
or that, you never know.
Legislate the electorate out of existence. It would be a concerning...
That's probably, Sunak's best option if he wants to form another government ever again.
Yeah. I don't think he will be. Okay, so also going on in British politics, big story at the moment. Basically the only negative story for Labour floating around in the last few weeks. And it's an ongoing saga. So, as you may know, Labour committed to borrowing to invest £28 billion every year of sort of a new Labour government in green technology. And sort of basically like a Biden-style, a Joe Biden-style Green New Deal type idea. That was watered down to, we'll do it in the second half of the Parliament. It's been watered down yet further. It is a pretty popular policy in polling, the idea of spending a lot of money on tackling climate change and creating green jobs. When the policy was announced, it actually did precipitate a little bump for Labour in the polls. But basically, half of the Labour Party, represented by sort of Rachel Reeves, Pat McFadden, sort of the Blairite faction, like, we've got to kill it. Then the other wing of the party, represented by the party, I mean the inner sanctum, not the actual left. You've got the likes of Ed Miliband, weirdly Sue Gray, and some other people in the leader's office basically saying, no, this is bold, it's ambitious, it's like the only uniquely big thing we have going for us. There's a debate about, should we scrap it? Will that make us look like flip-floppers? Or if we leave it, will it make us look like we're going to waste money and it'll sort of shatter our economic credibility? Have you been following this story? Do you have any thoughts on sort of the strategic dilemma facing Keir Starmer, Theo? I mean, in my view, the most important thing is to make a decision and stick to it and sort of stop the speculation about the policy?
I think, yeah, whatever he does, presenting a stable front is the best way to essentially maintain the anything but the Tory vote, which is a very broad church, a lot of voters. Obviously, a big kind of Green New Deal type of policy would probably be the best for Starmer popularity-wise. We were talking about his, campaign ad the other day, the amount, the range of voters he's clearly appealing to, and this kind of Keynesian mass stimulation, get Britain back on its feet thing will be very popular. But I'd say again, probably if he keeps a stable front, pick something and sticks to it, not going to be a problem electorally when it comes to election day. Because obviously the majority of discourse is not right now to do with. I mean, again, also Johnson's essentially had similar ideas to this, but they were kind of just watered down greenwash policies. But yeah,
it does feel like there's if the policy does die, there's something quite symbolic. It's like the last killing of sort of any sort of major centre left policy that Keir Starmer's offering. It's sort of it's the last one alive, Theo. It's sort of the last gasp of sort of a sort of Miliband-like social democratic politics. So it will be interesting strategically. It's also interesting whether, these kind of policies, what Labour's offering now, whether it gets bolder or even further watered down in government. There's a lot of questions about that. And I do think Keir Starmer, you kind of hurt in two ways. You either lean into the policy, which Keir Starmer did do in an interview recently, and you take the brickbats for, oh, Labour are saying they'll borrow money. Labour borrowing. There's some sort of attack ad there. Or you go the other way and it's another Keir Starmer U-turn. And in a way, I feel like another Keir Starmer U-turn is almost worse for his public image than I stand for something and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I think flip-flopping is probably the worst thing he can do. I'd imagine he knows that
You'd
because,
think,
again, from a very holistic point of view, his one of his biggest arguments that he has, of him against the current government is stability.
yeah.
Taking stability from the Conservative brand and adopting it into his own.
We will make tough decisions. We will this, we will that. You've kind of got to
Exactly.
lean into it. I mean, that was the thing in 2017. One of the reasons Jeremy Corbyn's ratings went up during that campaign was sort of the idea that he said stuff and meant it. Same with Nigel Farage. It's always been, he says stuff, he means it. So I feel like any politician that keeps changing positions, it's never actually a particularly good idea. It always comes across quite badly.
Yeah, especially if you then try to paper it over with some slogan like "strong and stable." If you remember that.
Yeah. What's the Labour one at the moment? I think the Labour one is the Labour one. The Labour one is currently like a fair. It was a fairer, greener future, which was rubbish.
It's something patriotic now, I think.
Yes. Is it build Britain back, Britain building again?
Back. I mean, it tells you something that we don't know what it is. But yeah, I mean, it's not as catchy as "Get Brexit Done."
Is the current Sunak slogan on top of your mind? Do you know it?
The current Sunak slogan. Oh, the current what is "Stop the Boats"? Something like that.
I think it sort of is, but now it's stick with the plan. Don't let Keir Starmer take us back to square one.
Right, I think we can trust Rishi Sunak to take us back to square one.
Don't let Keir Starmer take us. He keeps saying it in interviews. Every question he'll go, well, here's what I think about immigration, but the real question is for Labour. Keir Starmer will take us back to square one.
Yeah,
can't risk it again.
I think this is one thing Johnson did. This was one thing Johnson did incredibly well, or probably Dominic Cummings by extension. But Johnson just get Brexit done. So simple, oven-ready deal. He said it, and he just brought it into everything, and it was so effective. I still remember it. Also, Labour slogan: "For the many, but the few, not for the many, not the few." Again, very simple. So Starmer's current slogan is, "Let's get Britain's future back." So yeah, kind of, I guess, patriotic. Much more patriotic than Corbyn's slogan, I guess you could say.
Now, over to American politics. And Theo, I really hate to say it, it happened literally moments after we recorded last week's podcast. It's officially Rover. Ron DeSantis, out of the race, dropped out just before New Hampshire. Of course, New Hampshire then happened, the Republican primary. Donald Trump won in the state where he was supposed to be the weakest, by double digits, but not by sort of... I think we were almost too bullish on Trump, going by what happened. But now it's Trump against Nikki Haley. He's got a 25, 30-point lead going into South Carolina. There's lots of questions. How long will Nikki Haley stay in the race? Her coalition is sort of the worst possible coalition to beat Trump in a primary. Trump is now averaging 70% of the vote nationally. Is the Republican primary over, do you think, Theo? Is it all but over?
Well, I think Ron is done DeSantis, but
yes.
I think there's a caveat with Nikki Haley. Obviously, nobody thinks she's going to win. She knows she's not going to win at this rate. But Trump is a 77-year-old man who's worked a high-stress job for many years and has up to 90 legal cases against him, some of which could potentially disqualify him from the office of president, which begs the question, what happens if one of these renders him unable to take the office of president? Forget what he says, that he'll defy the deep state. The police could come to his house and arrest him.
It's just a funny image.
It doesn't go that deep. So yeah, it is a funny image.
It's just like
his mugshot.
They'll come to his house.
Oh, one of them is one of his golf courses or whatever.
Yeah.
And he can do another Chad face mugshot for us. But obviously, I think it's very clear she has the money from all her lovely Boeing contracts to stay in the race and just hope something happens to him. And if it doesn't happen to him, then it is over. But if not, then we've got this incredible backup candidate which just gives us so much hope for the future of the country.
I mean, what you're saying,
Half of my country.
what you're saying is I agree with, and it's true, right? It is over unless something crazy happens, something absolutely batshit crazy, which might happen. I think the issue is, in the event Trump wins, because he will win the nomination, he'll get the delegates unless the Supreme Court takes him off the ballot between now and Super Tuesday, which they almost certainly won't. So let's assume he wins the delegates and sort of finishes off Haley in the primary, and he has the overwhelming majority of the delegates. We get to a convention, he has to bow out. Maybe this is unrealistic, but it's within the realms of plausibility, more than it ever has been in a presidential contest. Does a plea deal. You have to drop out of the race or you're facing serious prison time, son. What happens then, right? Will his delegates really go to Nikki Haley? My assumption would be his delegates probably go to whoever he picks as his heir, not Nikki Haley.
Yes. Well, whether he's in a position to choose a predecessor with possibly insurrection-related charges against him is unclear. This is the constitutional grey area, really.
I mean, he's
a potential incoming presidential candidate maybe being hauled off to jail. Who knows? But I think.
Are you thinking of a scenario
staying in the race?
Are you thinking of a scenario where he actually wins the general election and then is disqualified?
Well, it could happen at any point. I'm not sure actually on the status of any of the legal cases. But look, Nikki Haley, if she stays in the race to the end, and still maintains this level of support. I doubt she can, but maintains a level of support better than, I don't know, Chris Christie. And then Trump's disqualified. The question will be, who's democratically the most viable candidate to pick? Well, Nikki Haley would definitely be up there, considering she's still got a noticeable chunk of the Republican base voting for her. It's a possibility, but it's very remote.
Let's see what Haley's saying, because she is out on the trail. I think the problem is she's so... The Republican Party will almost move heaven and earth to stop her being the nominee, because she's sort of alienated sort of the Trump wing. So in the scenario she gets to the convention and Trump has to drop off, I suspect it would be Trump's delegates will go and support, I don't know, who could it be? Maybe DeSantis. I don't know. They seem to have kissed and made up. Who knows? Let's see.
Well, and there's also Ramaswamy, who was.
Oh, Trump would.
You
Trump,
never know.
You could imagine Trump's delegates.
He could have made inroads into Trump's psyche by now. You never know. I mean, he's already made a few policy influences.
Yes, the central bank thing. You were saying this last week that Trump is promising no central bank digital currency, and he says Vivek told me to promise this. Exactly.
Which he didn't say that, but Vivek mentioned it. Obviously Vivek was planning it this way. So yeah, you never know.
Does this have
He's playing a long game?
Big symbolic meaning, Theo, in sort of the ANCAP community, the sort of the central bank currency thing? Like, what's that all about? Why does the American right feel so strongly about that?
Well, I think everyone should feel strong. I think everyone should feel strongly about it. But if you want to have a special episode all about that, we can definitely. I
think it's worth looking into, because I'm not clued in enough on it.
Well, I think
I can understand the rationale.
Essentially, that in short, the idea is that a lot of digital currencies that exist now are kind of created, to allow more financial autonomy, and then the government are then attempting to extend its monetary control over there, where people have essentially gone to evade things like inflation and issues that they see with the currencies. It's not going to land well with that base. I think that's the general idea.
That makes sense. Completely makes sense. All right, this is Haley.
I have been consistent from the beginning, Bill. You can ask me as many times as you want. I wanted to be strong in Iowa. We did that. I wanted to be even stronger in New Hampshire. We did that. I want to be even stronger in South Carolina. We're going to do that. And then we're going to go on to Super Tuesday. This is about continuing to build. Only 2 states have voted. We have 48 states left. You can't go and discount all of those voters who want to vote in this election. We're going to keep going as long as we keep growing, and I think that's what the American people want.
I think Trump is probably pleased it's Haley rather than someone like DeSantis, just because Haley's base of support in the primary is like independents and Democrats who have registered as independent or crossed over, whereas...
Yeah, she's not going to be sucking any votes away from him.
Exactly.
So he doesn't mind having her there.
Whereas with with DeSantis, even though he flopped, the theory for DeSantis was he'd appeal to Trump people, right? That was kind of the
yeah. I mean, if you remember last year, there was a lot of hope for DeSantis, and he seemed, in very good standing. And the same with Ramaswamy, and the same with a few other candidates. But then when push actually came to shove, clearly none of that mattered.
Yeah, I'm looking at a Trump rally from Nevada, where Haley isn't even on the ballot in Nevada. He hasn't mentioned Haley once. He's just talking about, in all these clips I'm looking at, he's just talking about Biden. So it does feel like Trump is pivoting to the general election.
Yeah, again, unless something happens legally, he's almost guaranteed. Well, he is guaranteed the nomination. So why not start the general election campaigning now?
It seems to be it. We're heading for, the New York Times says, the longest general election campaign in modern American history. And it's 2 candidates that they all hate. So that's going to be fun, isn't it? All right. Finally, quick story about Biden. There's a few things are up in the air at the moment. There's been a story just breaking. 3 American soldiers have been killed in the Middle East. So we can expect that to potentially escalate in worrying ways in the week ahead. But on the domestic front, basically the American economy is very strong. Consumer sentiment is starting to go up. Inflation is down. Wages are up. Unemployment is down. Sort of forecasts ahead are pretty optimistic. Meanwhile, Joe Biden still has a 38% approval rating. So my question to you, Theo, do you think over the course of many months, the American economy is going to help Biden in the end, and it's just not kicked in yet?
Yes. I mean, I would definitely argue the economy is not in a good state, but in terms of, everyday improvements in people's lives, market rallying, yes. This cycle is definitely very favorable to Biden. With the election, relatively close, I think the full extent of the recovery, or the soft landing, as people are calling it, could be felt by election time, and could definitely make a difference for sure. Again, it's the usual pattern of one administration increases spending, increases debt, passes it on to the next. At some point, it will snap, and whoever was in office at the time takes the blow. But it's really a team effort, a bipartisan team effort.
Yeah, I think there is something to that in the sense that at some point something's going to blow up, whether it's like securities in the market, or whether it's something to do with debt. Something will blow.
It's no one particular's fault. I mean, every administration of this century has spent more than the previous one, and in more unsustainable ways. But if there's a slight uptick in the economy, the sitting president definitely could benefit from that. I think that's definitely a possibility.
I think it is. I think we're in a uniquely polarized era, and people do defy gravity electorally. Candidates do badly when the economy's good, or do well. I mean, see Erdogan winning re-election with like 100% inflation in Turkey. People defy gravity on these things. But I do think Joe Biden is not... here's a bold prediction, all right? This may age absolutely terribly. Joe Biden will have a higher approval rating than he does now in November 2024, in my opinion.
Yes, I'd say based, purely off projected economic recovery. Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Same with, I think Trump will have a lower rating because he's at a high right now, only -9. So I think Trump will go down a bit, Biden will go up a bit. They may well be at parity in terms of unpopularity by the time of the election.
Good rhyme.
All right. To finish up the pod today, I thought we would have a look back at the month that was. This is our last pod for January. I don't foresee any emergency podcasts in the next week, although you never know. Would we do an emergency pod in response to like a major escalation in the Middle East? Is that in our wheelhouse? Maybe we would. What do you think?
Only if it bleeds into, I'd say, the political situation in the US or the UK. I'd say, to sound completely out of touch.
I mean, no, but that's the truth, right? We are a political podcast. Yeah. So it is a case.
I mean, if we want to make these episodes even longer, we can add a foreign policy section on top of this supposedly interim US section as well that we've suddenly started doing.
We're doing it all. Although this is going to be a shorter pod today, so I think we're making progress. We've cut it down. We've cut the fat a little bit, just like Theo likes the fat cut from government. I'm cutting the fat from the podcast.
I think, and we've cut out Sonny's long monologues as well, so that will help.
Yeah. It's so funny. Me and Sonny did like podcasts that were like 50 minutes long, and it was just us. We really must like the sound of our own voices. Okay, but looking back at the month that was in January, I want. Okay, what would your two key takeaways be from British politics in January 2024? Is there anything we've learnt that we didn't know at the start of the year?
Ooh, I'd say a leadership challenge for Sunak is not completely out of the question, actually.
Good shout.
I think that was something I was quite bullish on, that a leadership challenge is not going to do anything. But clearly, people in the Tory party are not as rational and politically calculating as I thought. So, yeah, I'd say I would have completely ruled that out at the start of the month. Now I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I would go with the trend we saw at the end of last year of the Labour vote share. If you remember, pod after pod, I kept going, the Labour vote share's dropping a bit. Basically, that's reversed, and the Conservatives have gone back into freefall. So I'd go with, the story is the polling gap is getting worse, not better. The fabled narrowing with a capital N is not happening right now. It's just not happening. And I think that probably has implications, because if the polls look like this in May, can you imagine how many councillors they lose?
Many.
I don't know what the upper limit is.
More than 2019.
Yeah. Just all of them probably at this point. It's like...
Can you imagine just there's one Conservative councillor in the whole country walks into his first meeting after the election.
It's just... Yeah. Well, that's what these polling numbers are saying. It's
Hi guys, strong economy, law and order, fiscal responsibility.
Stick with the plan. Don't let Labour ruin it.
In memory of my Conservative colleagues.
Oh my God! Yeah, it's pretty stark. We're currently, latest YouGov poll: Conservatives 20%, Labour 47%. Whew. Wow.
1997 magnitude, I'd say.
Yeah. Although
and it's Keir Starmer. Who would have thought?
Keir Starmer, the most successful Labour leader in Labour's electoral history, going by polling right now. Unreal. Unreal. Theo, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll hopefully see you next week for the first pod of February, which makes us a month closer to that general election. I hope you're excited.
I am ecstatic.
I am ecstatic too. All right, I'll speak to you soon, mate. Thanks.
Bye-bye.